morning, everyone. What a wonderful time together these last several days. And it's just been so fun seeing old faces, making new friends, and discussing a theme that's just very important for me and poignant in grace and truth. And thanks for sticking around on a Sunday. That's pretty cool. I've inherited my parents' travel anxiety. So I swear I think my brain would only feel comfortable if I show up 2 to 3 business days before the flight departs. So if you're anything like me, thanks for being here. Well, my name is George again. I've been a psychotherapist for 17 years and spent half of my career in private practice in Chicago, and then the back half has been in member care. And that's in large part due to attending this conference in 2009. I was with Cornerstone in Thailand for 5 great years, and now I'm serving in the UK with One Another Ministries, and love working with my team there. Many of them are here, and it's just been a great fit. We love helping missionaries heal and thrive on the field. I'm there with my wonderful wife, Heather, truly the better half. If you ask any of my teammates, they'll agree. They keep telling me that. I don't know why. It's not helpful. I'm kidding. I have super fun kids who are 5 and 3, and I called them this morning and told them I was a little nervous about today. And so Edmund said, "Daddy, can I pray for you?" He's like, "Oh, yes." So we closed our eyes and he prayed. And he goes, "Dear God, help Daddy's head not to pop off." Thanks, bud. I hadn't thought of that. And then my daughter, who's 3, goes, dear God, can you help my daddy's eyes not pop out?" So I have some new fears this morning. But I am covered in prayer. Both of them will make an appearance in this PowerPoint. I can't seem to help myself. There have been interventions in different stages of my life. None have been successful. Well, when the Mental Health and Mission released their planned theme for 2025, with grace and truth, pathways for humble and effective care, my inbox blew up. It was inundated with emails saying things to the effect of, "That's your music, George. And I guess we'll know where you'll be in November 2025. They were right. You see, my poor colleagues, stretching 17 years now, have heard me go on, annoyingly so, I'm sure, admittedly, about how a nuanced understanding of grace and truth is essential in both conceptualizing a healing path and, of course, walking it. I think part of the reason why I talk about it so much in case consultations and things of the like is that it's great at finding commonality across all theoretical orientations and modalities. Furthermore, it helps inform and deepen one's understanding about the healing process within their own context. It's certainly been true for me. It's helped me suck the marrow out of attachment theory, imago relationship theory, and object relations. And the best part in your case is you don't have to learn a whole new theoretical orientation. You don't have to buy into something new, a new premise, new jargon. Rather, it's a framework that can come alongside the work you're already doing. I'm going to see if my clicker works. Boom. All right. In light of all of that, this is going to be my goal today. How can we harness the power of grace and truth in helping us personally heal and our clients within our unique clinical context and style, or spiritual direction, or holistic, to enrich the quality and depth of our work? And the integration bit, seeing how the Bible lays all this stuff on healing out for us, and seeing where our orientation dovetails beautifully with our theology can grow our confidence in this transformative work we get to do. We're lucky. Well, you may be wondering how I became so passionate about grace and truth, and why I've been annoying colleagues and clients alike for so long. Like many of you here, the question, how do people heal and grow from their emotional wounds, is just what guided me into this field. It fascinated me. I think engineers like to know how engines work and take them apart. I just wanted to know how people healed. As a kid, I was moved by different stories where someone would be quite literally transformed. Dickens's A Christmas Carol is part of our big family Christmas ritual. And watching Ebenezer Scrooge go from this mean, isolated, inward-focused, hell on earth, to joy, outward-focused generosity, hope, and relational connection is so spiritual for me. I look forward to it every year. I could feel something coming alive in me, a joy, a curiosity, and more than anything, a desire to be part of the process. The list goes on and on. On the slide, we have the priest talking to Jean Valjean for any Les Miserables fans. And this is the scene where Jean Valjean is caught stealing silver. It looks like he's going to go back to prison, possibly for the rest of his life. But the priest has mercy on him, grace, and it's this powerful interaction where instead of giving him the judgment he probably deserved, he gives him grace, love, and guidance. It's awakened something in me. And the beauty of the story is Jean Valjean uses this moment, and he responds to that grace by completely changing his life, and so many people are blessed in the process. How did he go from here to there? How do I do it? And how do I help others do it? As a college student, I was always really drawn to Paul's words about transformation. I don't think Paul would have been as interested in coping skills as sometimes we are in this field. Nothing wrong with coping skills, but I think he knew we were capable of more than that. Healing, transformation, the renewing of our minds. So on my quest to learn how people heal, I started pursuing things all psychology. Crisis suicide hotlines, mentorship programs. I was shadowing shrinks, if you're a fan of alliteration, and majoring in psych. This all eventually led to graduate school, and it was so fun there because I was encountering all of these psychological models about how we heal and flourish. But when I was doing it, I kept just bumping into binaries. And they all felt similar in a way. I'll give you an example. Curiosity and compassion, being the healing agent in couples counseling. If you got clients who are locked in defensiveness and stonewalling and you help them replace that with curiosity and compassion about their spouse's experience, and you can sit back and eat popcorn and watch the healing happen. Love and limits in parenting. Being strict and super nice about it. Pops up in the research all the time. Acceptance and commitment. Being a healing agent for anxiety and depression and much more. So much so it's the name of a treatment modality. And I just keep hearing wonderful things about Hayden and Brandon who talked about ACT therapy. Can you think of some off the top of your head within your own context? Whatever that may be? I bet you could. I was good. I limited myself to 3. Well, it was a revelation to me when I finally read Dr. Henry Cloud's Changes That Heal. It helped me understand the origin story of these binaries I kept bumping into. After I read it, I couldn't see healing the same way ever again. And if you haven't read it and love integration, I highly recommend it. And this talk will be heavily influenced by Cloud's framing of how we heal in this book. I've had the great privilege of knowing Dr. Cloud well through really my whole life, through friendship, mentorship, and loads of clinical training. And in my humble opinion, his wisdom and ability to help people, no matter the problem, no matter the context they're in, is second to none. And it's been a consistent message over 30 years now, along with his writing partner, Dr. Townsend. And I bet there's some people here that go to the Townsend Institute or used to. It's a great place. Anyway, Cloud's big premise in Changes That Heal is, the Bible says loads of stuff about how we get better, how we process and heal. But it all basically boils down to 2 ingredients, grace and truth. And this is best exemplified in the person of Jesus Christ. John 1:14, we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Out of his fullness we have all received grace in place of grace already given. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. I had finally found out where I had kept encountering these repeated binaries. You see, they are rooted in the characterological aspects of the Lord who heals you, to use Isaiah language. But before I get too excited, maybe too late, and delve further into grace and truth and harnessing its power, let me get back to my original question. And that question is, the million-dollar question: how do we heal from emotional wounds? First of all, we got to put that in the context of what does that even mean? Does that mean I'm sad and I want to heal so I'm not sad anymore? I'm with Paul. That's not good enough. We need transformation. Otherwise, the symptoms just come right on back. Something I heard in graduate school in my internship from my favorite professor, is remember, you aren't treating symptoms, you're treating a person. I resonated with that deeply, and my favorite psychological theory and clinical work, both in what I was receiving my own personal therapy and what I was offering professionally, focused on what did this wound actually do to me? What capacities and abilities to thrive what capacities and abilities did it break in my equipment to be able to thrive? More simply, what got broken? Am I having trouble being vulnerable and opening up and trust? Am I struggling with boundaries, saying no, standing up for myself? Is my people picker a little off? I keep finding myself in these dating relationships where I'm just not treated well. Fears of abandonment? Or am I so perfectionistic that I feel bad all the time because I'm just internally judged? And once I've identified what got broken, how do I heal? Well, to get healed, we need to get into processes that address the basic broken equipment. For my fellow ADHD people, I'm going to repeat it. To get healed, we need to get into processes that address the basic broken equipment. How does that happen? Well, I want to talk about the first ingredient of grace, the first characterological aspect of the Lord who heals you, grace. What is grace? Well, lots of Christians, including myself, thought that grace is that God just accepts me unconditionally, which is a pretty good gig. But that's not grace. That's a manifestation of grace. Grace is much more. Grace is unmerited favor, not earned nor deserved, which is great news. Even more, it means God is for us. It means he's coming down and intervening to help us in the good work he's began in us, right? And it means he's giving us what we need to get better. That's huge. You guys and gals, that means we get stuff. Let me illustrate this point. One of the best things that's ever happened to me was becoming a dad. Creating a little nugget with the person I love the most, just outlandishly wonderful gift. Blows me away. But as all new parents soon realize, that this baby needs a lot of care. We learned why they call it the fourth trimester. And on Edmund's, my oldest, first day in the world, the one worried about my head popping off, this is hour 2 of his life. My wife's in the recovery room, it's just me and a nurse. And then she abandons me, speaking of fear of abandonment. And I'm just sitting here with a baby, all alone. And I'm like, I've been to graduate school. What does this baby need? Grace, he needs grace. So I'm holding him in his arms stiffly, a little bit learning the waddle. And I just say, Edmund, I unconditionally accept you. Many of you parents and mothers are way ahead of me. That didn't do a darn thing. In fact, started crying way more. And even months later, I brought him into my office for some psychoanalysis to impart this unconditional acceptance. Nothing, you guys. No, Edmund needed a lot more than that. He needed to be graced, unmerited, things that he couldn't bring to the party himself. He wasn't earning this. He's 5 years old now, still not helping with rent. No, Heather and I would come in, nurture, as our great joys, soothe. Heather would feed. We'd clothe him, our great joy, giving him things he didn't possess. It's no different for us as we grow. We need to be given stuff we don't possess. This is why self-help is called an oxymoron. Dr. Cloud defines grace as unbroken, unearned, uninterrupted, accepting relationship. He goes on to say we see this grace relationship depicted in Eden. One of the hallmarks of this relationship is they could be exactly, or Adam and Eve could be exactly who they were. Guilt and shame weren't even part of the equation yet. Can you imagine? Have any relationships like that? Don't need to hide your thoughts, your feelings, your true self. No reason for the false self to show up. Don't need to do anything to be loved. They accept you, warts and all. As a clinician, it's abundantly clear if someone has had this type of relationship or hasn't. And as member care providers, therapists, healers, it's honoring and meaningful work we can offer this relational grace, isn't it? One of the big rewards of our field. I think grace, then, is the relational aspect of God's character. Okay, cool story, George. I've been learning about grace since Sunday school. How does it help me heal? Well, to heal, we have to get connected to a relational delivery system of God's grace, which heals the broken equipment. 1 Peter 4:10, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. There's a lot more knowledgeable and experienced theologians here than me, but let me take a stab at this. I think it means when you're using our gifts to help someone else, then we are quite literally administering the grace of God in its various forms. We are gracing people. We're healing people. This is the basic doctrine of ecclesiology as I understand it. This is the church. The body heals, grows, builds itself up in love, Ephesians 4:16, as each part does its work. So how do I heal? Breaking this down even more, I have to sit down with someone that can provide the things that God has for me that I don't yet have. Do I struggle with self-validation? If I'm in something scary or hard, I can't say this is hard. I need a brother or sister in Christ to have compassion for me. Model that for me. Are my parents hard on me and their critical voice is just kind of running on loop? I need encouragement from the body of Christ if I want to heal. Or maybe I suffer from the tyranny of the urgent. I'm running around, there's anxiety. I need someone who is patient, who can practice the presence of God and sit with me. All the one another's in the New Testament to deliver that grace. I think that's part of the reason why I'm with one another. I love their names so darn much. And when you're empty inside and become part of a community that begins to love you how you weren't loved, it's incredible. A verse that my wife loves is Psalm 68:6. The Lord puts the lonely into families. Ever seen that personally or professionally? Well, this is rhetorical, but how many one another verses do you think are in the Bible? Lots of different answers in the old Google, I assure you, but one of the more generous ones was 100. 100! That's a lot of grace healing delivery options, guys and gals. Bear one another's burdens. Build up one another. Consider others better than yourself. Admonish one another. Comfort and encourage one another. Confess your faults. And what I love about the design of this is not only God gives us each unique one another giftings, or as my son likes to say, superpowers, but he puts people in our life that have the one another giftings we most need. How tender. Truly, he's a good father. Well, we see the healing power of grace in therapy all the time, especially when we're able to use high levels of Rogerian empathy, unconditional positive regard, compassion free of judgment, and able to really enter their world and look around in their shoes. Before going overseas, I had my own little practice in downtown Chicago. And this picture is the view from my office there on a dreary Chicago winter. And I think the dreariness reflects well a client I want to tell you about there named Judy. She was in sales in this very competitive market, highly ambitious, successful, attractive, yet deeply depressed and angry. I remember the first day I met her and welcomed her into my office, and her corporate suit and immaculate makeup stood in stark contrast to my classical therapist sweater and wrinkled khakis. She gave me a cold handshake. I was only able to hold my eye contact briefly, and then it was like Terminator scan of my office. Her whole body indicating distrust, high shoulders, furrowed brow. It's not an uncommon experience for a psychotherapist, but it's always a telling one. She saw almost everyone as a threat, and inevitably this meant she was heartbreakingly isolated. And hearing her story, this perception came as no surprise. You could understand how many false narratives have formed, such as you are only as good as your performance. Nobody cares about you, really. Don't trust anyone but yourself. You see, Judy was the battleground in her parents' divorce. At first, it wasn't so bad. Her parents were over-the-top kind. Dad especially was taking her all over to these fun places, but that all stopped after the divorce proceedings. She was being used. She knew that. That was the thing about Judy. She was so smart. As for Mom, she was swallowed by resentment from the divorce, leaking all over Judy. And she never helped Judy with her own grief or process. Rather, Judy was her comfort, her little bestie. At first, Judy felt good that her mother was letting her in and that she could help. But of course, over time, these horrible boundaries were putting adult problems on a preteen. Judy was alone, overwhelmed by her mother's needy and meshed love. And when she began to distance herself from her mother, that's when things got ugly. That's when she met the anger and the manipulation. She didn't feel safe. Judy didn't feel safe, so she pulled away, not just from the primary attachments, from everyone. Her hardware for bonding with safe people and developing trust was shattered. It was non-existent. It was clear she needed to be graced by a relationship. Or how Irvin Yalom, father of existential psychotherapy, would say, she desperately needed to people her life. Now, when I began talking to Judy about this, about finding someone who could encourage her, engage with her for her own sake, she scoffed. She thought I was selling her something. You see, people had used her for sex, money, better divorce deals, etc. her whole life. And to her credit, she was quick to admit she was playing by the same rules with others. She had this refrain she would say with a half smirk, it's a dog-eat-dog world out there. Minimize your own suffering and minimize how she hurt others. But deep down, she knew that something was wrong. And life wasn't supposed to be this way. Lovingly, that's written on all of our hearts, the great ally for every psychotherapist. And with that knowledge and desire for change, she slowly and gently began to take courageous, vulnerable steps in session. With safety and empathy present, she began to process her anger and sadness for the first time. And finally, it got to be about her, not Mom and Dad. She got to get what she didn't get from her parents. Grace was giving her stuff. Slowly and gently, she started moving towards vulnerability with other safe people. Not her sales competitors and deadbeat dad, but with safe people who were for her. The healing was happening. Life wasn't just a lonely hellscape filled with competitors she had to beat, but it was turning into a place that could offer care, compassion, joy, fun, hope even, laughter. I remember later she came to my office months later and she was like, I remember it clearly, I think I caught a boyfriend. Referring to a romantic relationship as an illness caught, let us know we had some work to do. But she had begun lowering walls, feeling worthy enough to be in a romantic relationship, discern safe from unsafe, and developing the ability to bond. But then you got to respond to that grace. And the Bible says we can insult the spirit of grace. We can quench it in Thessalonians. So don't need to just be provided the help. We got to open up and respond to it. Paul said we have opened wide our hearts to you in 2 Corinthians. And it was so cool when Judy did just that. It started in the therapy room, the great gift our clients give us, opening their hearts to us. And then it bridged this older, kind, married couple in her apartment building and continued to externalize from there. The power of grace. Some application time. Where am I being vulnerable with safe people who can give me what I didn't get? Professional application. How does my theoretical orientation or healing framework incorporate the ingredient of grace? How does my framework identify and address the basic broken equipment? But we can't only use grace, as it would limit true intimacy. God says we're to be people of grace and truth. So let's talk about the second ingredient. Let's talk about truth. What is truth? Truth is structure. Truth is aligning ourselves with reality and performing to meet those realities. My favorite quote about mental health is M. Scott Peck. Mental health is an ongoing process of dedication to reality at all costs. I think that's a banger. Do kids still call it a banger? If they do, it's a banger. And if you looked at our field, I don't know if that's the first definition of mental health you'd pull. But I think he's dead on. Reality is your friend in the healing business. That gets real clear, clear very quickly when you're working with someone who's depressed, who's just believing all these automatic untrue thoughts, just believing them all. When I was depressed in my 20s, I had a health condition, and it was very difficult, and I just felt like it was too much for everyone. I promise you, it was like no drama. It was just this belief, oh, my friends don't want to hang out with me anymore. I'm too much of a drag. I'll pull them down. I believed this in my core, and I needed a relational delivery system to help me get back to reality. Thank God for therapists and community that did that, because it was hilariously untrue. So with grace being the relational aspect of God's character, truth is the structural aspect of God's character. Truth is often a map. It guides and directs healing, and thank God for it. But like we have to respond to the grace that's given to us, we also have to respond to truth. That is to say, not only are we supposed to be in an environment where we're learning and being taught how the world works and what we need to do and be to heal, but we also got to be held accountable to meeting those requirements. Key point. Well, a great way to talk about that is through developing emotional regulation. That's the equipment. We have an experience. We got to put things in the right perspective and calm down without having a fit. I was tested on my delayed flight on the way here. Well, this picture in the slide, I can't look. The picture on this slide is affectionately known as Sad Pumpkin in our circles. This is our precious, precocious, adorable, big-hearted Edith. She was 2 when this picture was taken, and this was after a particularly spicy tantrum. And in those times, we scooped her into our lap, and we'd soothe her, we'd validate it, and be there for her. But then there's this developmental thing where she's bad daddy and goes for a hit. You kind of gotta do the bob and weave. And so I would say, no, honey, Daddy's going to keep his body safe. You have to use your words. And then she had to meet the bar, which builds the equipment that turns into emotional regulation. Truth guides that. And this is exactly what happens in good counseling too, by the way. Well, I wonder if you'll indulge me and talk about how truth heals in a clinical example. I'm a certified imago relationship therapist, and I just love it. And its theory and interventions beautifully reflect this process of repairing and building the broken equipment from childhood. It's its key focus. And we do that by allowing, helping, and coaching your partner into becoming this grace and truth delivery system you most need to give you what you didn't get. And also be able to heal the broken stuff in you so you can give it to your spouse. Let me tell you about Steve and Nancy. That's Harville and Helen Hendricks, not Steve and Nancy, by the way. But Steve and Nancy walked into my office and sat down on my couch. You know how you can get AI to generate images? Well, they were like if you asked AI to say, AI, give me an image of a young, happy Christian American missionary couple. Boom, you would have had Steve and Nancy. They were sincere, eager, amiable, and hopeful. I loved them, and so would you have. However, once they began talking about their arguments, they were getting more significant. Those beautiful and heartfelt smiles I saw in the waiting room quickly replaced with the telltale signs: discouragement, powerlessness. It flummoxed them because these fights were growing in intensity and frequency, especially since coming on the field, the opposite of what they expected. Nothing they tried worked. They were doing gratitude challenges, date nights. They were praying together. Good stuff. But in therapy, they started telling me about their core scene. Core scene's a imago terminology that means the repetitive and painful argument that's playing out each partner's emotional wounds from childhood. Just this dance. Stuff is going on. And it's that kind of deja vu feeling you get in therapy of like, oh, I remember this fight. For them, it was happening in the car. Road rage. Steve would start to get angry at other drivers and get increasingly inflammatory comments. And that was met with belittling and criticism. Now, we're good Christians in here, so I know you probably don't identify with this dynamic at all. But if you can have some grace for poor old Steve and Nancy. I'll spare you the details of how this played out, as I'm sure your imagination will do just fine. What I want to talk to you about is how the dedication to reality at all costs and meeting the requirements for growth healed them. How truth guided this thing. For Steve, the process looked like this. He'd have curiosity and compassion, which helped him find the truth of what was really going on for Nancy in those moments. Then he was able to say to himself, she's not criticizing me because she's some psycho controller, my worst fear. She's scared. She grew up in a home where her voice counted for nothing. She couldn't stop things that frightened her. So when I'm angry while I drive, her lizard brain is saying, I'm unsafe, he's going to hit me. Preposterous to Steve. He would never dream of it. But now he knew the truth of what was going on for his wife. And he had the option not personalize it anymore and offer a defense. Rather, he could be the healing agent for his spouse. He could give the new experience, to use Irvin Yalom language. He could one another her, to use New Testament language, by letting her voice finally matter and respond to that scared little girl. Steve worked hard. He would have been proud of him. He was developing his emotional regulation. Reminds me a little bit of the plenary last night, doing a lot of breath work, warm, positive self-talk, all the things. But remembering and holding his wife's story moved the needle most for him. Then he could get to this. Oh, did you see that guy? Oh, I'm sorry, honey. I know my anger scares you. I'm breathing. I'm calming down. You're safe. I know it's hard for you. I'm so sorry. I'm right here. He's not reactive, personalizing, defensive. And she has a voice, and she's being heard, finally. You see that? And this next point's on your side here, but the big imago premise is that your partner's wounds and their need for a new experience is a built-in blueprint, structure, map, truth to help you develop the equipment that's broken in you. I'll say it again. Your partner's wounds and their need for a new experience is a built-in blueprint for you to help you develop the equipment that's broken in you. Wild. So let's play that out. Nancy needed a calm, non-reactive person who could hear her fear in her fear states. Bam. She got an emotionally repressed road rager. That's what she got. And the good news, that's the design. The conflict is growth trying to happen. It's an opportunity for them to heal. Do you see how truth is helping Steve and Nancy heal? See how this marriage thing has a design? All right, admittedly, you're being gracious. We're going down the imago relationship rabbit hole, and bad news, we're going to go a little bit further if you'll let me. This also works in the reverse. Nancy began to enter the same process. She, through curiosity and compassion, began to learn much about how Steve felt. It first started with her thinking, I wonder what it feels like for him when I start criticizing him when he's road raging. I wonder whose shoes I'm filling for him in those moments. And that was the key. That was the key that unlocked everything. You see, because she began to learn about Steve's mother. And like Nancy, Steve's mom was incredibly scared of men's anger. And with very good reason if you heard her story. When Steve was young, his mom would squash his anger. It was the unallowed emotion. It was too much for her to bear. And Nancy was heartbroken truly to learn that in her own fear of anger, she was using the same exact playbook as Steve's mom. Criticism and shame. And now it was Nancy's turn to address her broken equipment. And that way she could heal and then give Steve what he didn't get in childhood. When we say relationships heal, this is what we mean. Their brave and relentless pursuit of truth and reality about their dynamic led them to personal discovery, helped heal parts of themselves, and allowed them to become the safe, connected healing agent for their spouse. Okay, admittedly, that was Imago 404. But what I want you to take from it is this. understanding what's really happening in reality under the surface and developing the broken equipment in you to meet that reality is what transforms us. You know, it's wild. There's all these one another commands that will repair all the stuff that's broken in us, but we don't look at it that way. Sometimes we just think about religion, rules, things we got to do, but we don't understand the power of it. I mean, let's just look at Steve and Nancy and their one another examples, bearing each other's burdens. Steve said, "You being scared in the car is not okay with me. I want you to feel safe in the car with me. You plus me versus this problem. Let's take this burden on together." Considering others better than yourself. Nancy was able to say, "Okay, I get so scared, I'm going to try to put that in that corner, and I want to lock into what criticism does for you. I want to know just what that's like for you. A death to self to lock in to her husband." So why isn't it always easy? Why are there so many divorces? Why does the world seem so broken? And what seems to be blocking the healing growth? Well, I'd submit to you that the reason is there's been a disintegration of grace and truth. The first one I want to talk about is truth without grace. Part of Cloud's genius and change that heel is that understanding the impact of the fall as we see first evidence with Adam and Eve, and then extrapolating that story to understand how we got broken and how we heal. Adam and Eve had truth and grace perfectly integrated in Eden. Heaven on earth, freedom to be exactly who they were. Beautiful, joy-filled connection with the Trinity. Can you imagine? But then the wedge came. And when they heard God talking in the garden, we know the story, they hid. Shame and guilt had entered the world, and we lost our safety. The sin severed the connection to grace and truth. On this slide is Thomas Cole's haunting painting titled "The Expulsion from Eden." But God didn't leave them in isolation long. He's always coming for us. He gave them the law, a blueprint, a structure that can guide them and set limits. Thank God. But there was a big problem, a real big problem. It came without grace. And they could never live up to God's standards. You see that in your own life, and you see that in every single Bible story. Thus, truth without grace is the law, which leads to judgment. Paul talks about the limits of the law thoroughly in Romans and Galatians, right? He calls it a curse, a prison, that the law brings wrath, and it causes us to sin more even. In James, it talks about this brutal all or none reality. You know, you break just one little part of it, you chomp on some shellfish or something, you break all of it. Where's the grace in that? You see, truth without grace show up devastatingly in relationships. Truth before grace or relationship brings guilt, anxiety, anger. Any therapist will tell you that. In couples counseling, we say it's important to connect before you correct. Snuck in another binary. It's important to grace before you truth. Just keep hammering that point down. Well, let me tell you about another case where this was happening, a heartbreaking case. I was working with a missionary couple in East Asia. We'll call them Harry and Sally. Yeah, it's from when Harry met Sally. I wasn't feeling creative. And she was quite bright, and she beautifully painted the scene of childhood. She was kind of like listening to a Pat Conroy novel. She was the best. And Sally's mom made the father all bad. Hearing the story, that was a pretty easy narrative to digest. Homeboy did not do himself any favors. But it was also apparent in Sally's story that the mom could not hold any dad at all. It had to be directed elsewhere. So when dad was out of the picture for the most part, guess who got to be bad? Sally, of course. And then she got married to a well-meaning great guy who made her feel special and, best of all, not bad. But he was struggling with worth and belonging issues even then. And as the years went by, the marriage started replicating childhoods. And one big way that went down is this projection of bad just continued. For Sally's part, first her dad was all bad, then Sally was all bad, and now it was Harry's turn. Their wounds were this perfect storm that created and sustained this pathway. It wasn't one person's fault, it was the dynamic. When attempting to practice curiosity and compassion in session towards her husband, Sally, by her own admission, felt so much contempt that she couldn't see her husband anything beyond a lost cause. It was important that he be viewed as the problem. I can't hear about how you don't feel valued or cared for by me after the way you treated us and the kids for years. I'm sorry. Even more heartbreaking is that she was accurate and clear in the anger. She was smart. And there was lots of truth in that lie. He did struggle with ambition. He did have outbursts of anger that scared the kids. He did have conflict at work frequently. But the lack of grace did not let her see reality, all of who Harry was. And he, like Sally, was fantastic. I always get jealous of physicists because they have these laws, we don't have those laws, but let's make some together. I think one of our laws would be what you focus on grows. And she really focused on his shortcomings, and they grew and grew. I felt for her, because she's so understandably focused on just getting rid of this bad problem in her childhood, but tragically she did it by separating grace and truth and just clinging to this unintegrated truth. And Harry had learned to withhold grace from himself before he met Sally. And as long as he could remember, he always felt like he was the one to blame. You see how their absence of grace was causing brutal judgment? Good rule of thumb. If you are yearning for love, as both of these spouses were, you need grace. Now this can go in the other direction. Grace without truth. And as clinicians, kind of bad news here, I think we tend to be more susceptible to this disintegration. So if truth without grace is judgment, then grace without truth is license. If it feels good, if it's good for me. Grace without truth means we are lost, directionless. And we know there are ways to be loving that don't match the truth of God's ways. Your love becomes unhelpful. Clinically, we talk about this all the time. Codependent love, smothering love, enabling love. I'm sure all of you could think of many examples of this clinically, such as the codependent married to the alcoholic who's a key part in sustaining that addiction. But I'm wondering if we could be brave together today. Do something a little bit different. Because I've seen clinicians who haven't integrated grace and truth well. I'm not high-horsing them. None of us will ever have grace and truth perfectly integrated. That was only Jesus' thing. Our lack of integration is correlated to how far we can take our clients. Or Nancy Crawford talked about Fran White, we can only take people as far as we've gone ourselves. Or something like that. I feel like I butchered it. Or scary version, our lack of integration could break the Hippocratic Oath. It could cause harm. Consider this little vignette that I wrote as a cautionary tale for us clinicians. Timothy closed the door and then collapsed onto his sofa where his clients normally sat. A symbolism that was not lost on him. Rubbing his forehead and feeling profoundly discouraged, Timothy thought, well, why are my clients always plateauing? Therapy started with such hope. People would frequently say, you're such a good listener, Tim. I feel safe. Thanks so much for listening and caring for me. But things seem to just fizzle over time. And if he was being honest with himself, many clients weren't coming back. He was providing exceptional listening and warmth. He was gifted, but there was no direction. Furthermore, he had an inability to deal with negative but true realities in his life. Thus, Timothy's unconscious goal in therapy was to help the client feel better, not to grow. It was easier for him to comfort the pain rather than address how the client got there. In couple sessions, it would look like this. If a spouse was being sharply critical and unsafe in session, he really struggled in setting limits on that. So the unsafety at home was unsafety in the therapy room, and marriage wouldn't get better. They would feel hopeless. If there was a maladaptive pattern wreaking havoc in someone's life, it was really difficult for Timothy to identify it and then confront it in truth and love. Rather, sometimes he was holding their hands as they detonated their life. So like we said, if you're yearning for love, you need grace. Well, if you're yearning for structure or guidance, you need truth. A little more application time. Am I needing more grace or more truth to address my broken equipment right now? And once grace is established through safe, loving relationship, how does my framework or orientation integrate structure and guidance, truth, to help them develop their broken equipment? How's my process doing that? All right, we're getting to the good stuff now. We're getting close to landing the plane. Grace and truth together, finally. If you've ever seen Babette's Feast, they have this great end of the movie where it talks about grace and truth and married each other. So with grace alone, we are saved from condemnation, but we cannot experience true intimacy with just grace alone. But when we offer grace through loving, safe relationship, and also offer truth, truth about who we are, truth about who he or she is, and truth about the world around us, we respond with our true self. No need to hide anymore. Or as Cloud brilliantly says, we literally reverse the effect of the fall when we integrate grace and truth. No more guilt, no more shame, but authentic connection. How cool is that? Well, I want to talk to you about how Jesus brilliantly models grace and truth, safety and intimacy for us in John 8:3-11. I don't have time to read the passage today, but that's Rembrandt's depiction of when Jesus responds to the woman caught in adultery. So that's the one, let any one of you without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. And then Jesus says, women, where are they? Has no one condemned you? No one, sir, she said. Then neither do I condemn you, Jesus declared. Go now and leave your life of sin. So tender. The law said she deserved death. Jesus offered grace in the form of forgiveness and acceptance. He accepted her knowing she was an adulteress, unconsciously guided by selfish desires. But he didn't stop there. He offers direction. Go now and leave your life of sin. And he tenderly, all of his sermons, is telling you just how to do that. He's telling you the truth. So the magic of grace and truth, or acceptance and direction here, is that it serves to bring the authentic self into relationship. She doesn't have to hide her sin anymore. And this is the only way healing can happen if our true self is present. If the false self is in the light and the true self in the shadows, we miss the opportunity to heal and slide deeper and deeper into disconnection. We saw this with Harry and Sally. Sally felt like she needed to be the correct and wrong one to stay safe. That was the false self. Harry all too easily accepted that he was the problem. He was the one to blame long before he met Sally. That's not who he was. It was the false self. Their broken equipment and false selves blocked their ability to connect and heal. It was tragic to watch. A train wreck. But then we saw grace and truth integrated with Steve and Nancy. And by staying in loving and safe relationship, grace, and a willingness to understand what's happening for each other, their dynamic, and how they can be the new experience, truth. Profound healing was able to happen. Nancy didn't need to stay in the false self of this hypercritical exterior, just criticizing her husband to protect herself and her fear. No, she could show this scared little girl to her husband. This vulnerable, true part of herself. There was no need to hide because Steve cared. He accepted her warts and all. Otherwise, they're just locked in this dance of road rage and criticism. And Steve's working hard on this directional map, right? He's working on regulating his anger and learning how to feel and process and not suppress. So by approaching their conflict with truth and grace, they encountered the growth that was already trying to happen, responded to it, and now they're enjoying the fruit of true intimacy. And few things in life are better than that. What an example Jesus has provided for us. How tender of him to show us this blueprint for growth. Be so kind to people like the woman caught in adultery, to save them. And he does it throughout the scriptures. Last slide here, guys, and in closing. I want you to think about, what are your particular one another giftings? What are your God-given superpowers here? Are you an encourager? Are you a teacher? Are you a bearer of burdens? And just as important, what one another's or grace and truth healing delivery options are you most in need of in this season of life right now? Do you need comfort? Do you need to replace an inner judge with a nurturer? Maybe you need accountability. It's been such a great couple of days, learning so much about grace and truth. And let us leave this place and honor God and go out both giving the one another that he's gifted us with to our community, and possibly even more importantly, advocating for the one another's we most need. That way, the body of Christ grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. Thanks, everybody.